Okay. First of all, I would like to say thank you again for having me today. And I would like to start with a brief introduction of my professional role, because I'm somehow I have more guests than the other guests, according to the editorial aims of the magazine and with the aims of this seminar. I'm a pharmacist, as Professor Romadori told you before, and I'm responsible for quality assurance for phase 1 clinical trials in the Regional Hospital of Ancona. And what I'm trying to do is to support the medical directors and physicians, that in my case are investigators and sub-investigators, to control all clinical processes and to prevent any potential failure. So I would like to share my personal perspective, hoping that could be contribute to the debate and open discussions on this very interesting topic. So I would like to start with my presentation agenda. And before, I would like to start with an overview of pharmacological categories, and then share some side aspects of therapies, what I call an extended analysis of therapies, and to conclude the proposed preventive strategies in diseases management. But step back to the pharmacological categories. We can classify pharmacological products according to the origins. So the first one is clearly the herbal medicinal product or botanical drugs. It depends on EMA definitions, on FDA definition. Moreover, there are the chemical compounds and synthetic pharmaceutical products that have been dominated the pharmaceutical scene until now. They are the most used. The third category is biological medicinal product, and a better definition could be the molecularly targeted therapies. Among those, the most used are obviously the monoclonal antibodies and the protein kinase inhibitors. This is here they are a representation of the main mechanism of action of monoclonal antibodies, like antibody-dependent cellular cytotoxicity or complement-dependent cytotoxicity. And of the same scientific articles are the receptors involved in the immune mediation between T cells and antigen presenting or tumor cells, what is called the immune checkpoint blockade. The fourth category is the ATMPs, the advanced therapies medicinal product. According to EMA definitions, there are 4 types of these ATMPs: the gene therapies, the somatic cells, and tissue engineered and combined ATMPs is now, I think, considered the one of the cutting-edge technology in terms of therapies. But what I would like to share is which is the common feature of all of these categories. It's clear the undetermined grade of uncertainty. Every time we administer therapies, we accept, or better say that we share the risk of adverse events, lack of effectiveness, and any other potential fears with the patients. So according to the topic of the seminar, the grade of uncertainty could be extended in what I consider 2 interesting aspects. The first one is the interval between toxicity and underdosing. And in these fields, which are the point that we have different pharmacological and toxicological parameters, like maximum tolerated dose on or dose limit toxicity or right phase 2 dose. There are many others. At this point, I would like to put focus on the first two that are considered the pillars of the dosage. Most of data about the safety are based on these parameters. And how much these pillars are solid, referring to the molecularly target therapies or biological target therapy. They are used a lot in the synthetic and chemical compounds clinical trials. And for example, in this is even in these textbooks, this is a phase 1 cancer clinical trials practical guide. There are definitions that are different between Europe and the United States. For example, for Europe, it's a determined number of patients that's showing dose-limiting toxicity, and for the United States, it's more similar to phase 1, phase 2 right dose. Anyway, this is an example of heterogeneity of the definition of the DLT. Anyway, and I would like to underline that this doubt is not about the parameter itself, but I would like to underline that is an indicator of the whole system about the assessment of the safety and then to move to other doses. The other aspect linked to the undetermined degree of uncertainty is obviously the unexpected adverse events. And that could be divided in instance like clonal seizures or allergies, and delayed adverse events that could be very dangerous, for example, for outpatients. So overall, the undetermined grade of uncertainty has an impact on the patient safety, and how we can decrease or block this one. In my proposal is try to enlarge the focus and work on expected forecasts, elaborating preventive strategies from micro to macro, starting for genetics. One of the main effective application is the molecular tumor board, supporting by several scientific articles. And the other is the enhancing an alternative approach, zooming out. In this is an example, an alternative approach referring to pharmacodynamics. These are in vitro clinical trials where administered multiple low-dose therapies and show an important blockade of action on the growing of the tumor size. This is another example of the, let's say, the history of the clinical trials for ACC, and we can look at the last, even in the first line, then in the second line, the last clinical trials try to combine different active principle kinase inhibitors and monoclonal antibodies. If we look at for other type of proposal preventive strategies, there is the pharmacokinetics. Here they are proposed different type of technology, for example, polymer hydrogel vaccines or nanoscales vaccines. And the last aspect at the management is the elaborating what is the risk assessment. Risk assessment in the last years has become widely applied to clinical trials, especially after the serious adverse events of TGN 1412 in 2006 for the cytokine releasing syndrome of the health volunteers. And among all of tools to control the risk, EMA suggests the failure mode effects critical analysis that I personally consider was the most effective, because I have the feature to quantify and consequently give a priority ranking of what is unacceptable hazard to be mitigated. Anyway, I don't want to go more extensive on the technical aspects. However, I would like to put the focus on the three main factors that are severity, occurrence or probability, and detection. This algorithm creates what is called a risk priority number. But before, we have to identify potential risk, and which are the main critical sectors. In fact, could be the first one could be the regimen extended to pharmacological aspect, personnel, devices, and equipment. We can add in also all a problem about the compounding. If we think about EV medicines or drugs. The other aspect is diagnostic biological samples and also imaging. And last but not least, the clinical emergencies. For each field, we could recognize potential failures and then mitigation action where it's required, or where the system has not the feature to control and to block this potential failure. In conclusion, I'm aware that all of the proposed strategies are expensive in terms of time, personnel, and funds, especially in time. However, I would like to leave you with a question, that is how much we can consider the governance of standard therapies different to clinical trials, especially if you look at the future therapies. This is my last slide, is a flow chart of the administration and management of a CAR-T therapy. And there are many units involved. It's a very complex process. And so referring to the proposal, it could be an advantage to be prepared to this type of therapy. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Alessandro, for having allowed us to go into the problems of preventing side effects and dangers in clinical trials, and then for later on for the patient. So how important is it to implement personnel and diagnostic features and so on. So as a clinician, I know that companies wants to go straight ahead and to get the study done as quick as possible, and then the clinician is left with the problems, with the side effects, and we know what we mean when you talk about monoclonal antibodies, and ipilimumab, or the side effects are decreasing with the new ones, but still are very problematic. Thank you very much.